Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Linda Stermer. Linda and Todd Stermer met in 1989 when they were both 25 years old. After that, they quickly developed feelings for each other. At the time, she was in the process of divorce and had 2 daughters. She and Todd married a few years later, in August 1993. She gave birth to twins, Trevor and Trenton. The 2 sons later shared that they loved their father very much, describing him as a great father and is an ideal role model. He always spends time coaching, teaching sports, and encouraging his children to have a healthy lifestyle. He is also known as a family man who always puts his family first. Together with Linda, he took in a nephew who was just 2 years old when he was left without a family. Raising him as one of their own, the Stermer family lived happily together, including Todd, Linda, and 5 children. However, over time, Linda began to notice that Todd was becoming more and more irritable. Linda's daughter from her first marriage, Ashley Gibson, said she had witnessed he throwing a laundry basket at her mother. He would often go out with friends, disappear at night, and return home drunk, aggressive, and yelling at his wife. Linda had to do all the housework by herself. When Ashley was 11 years old, Todd began to lose his temper and yell at her, saying that she was a 2-legged dog just like her mother. Linda, he said that she would become a whore just like her mother. He also beat her with his hands and even a belt. Linda confirmed that Todd was also violent towards her on one occasion. In a fit of rage, he hit she in the face, leaving her with a bruise on her cheek. Todd later sent her flowers and apologized, saying that he deeply regretted his actions. Unfortunately, the abuse didn't stop and continued to happen. Repeatedly, however, Trevor and Trenton denied this information, saying that they never saw Todd using force on Linda or Ashley. They also said that they never saw bruises on Linda's face. Linda's mother admitted that she never trusted Todd. She described he as someone who could be very charming, but he can also be the worst person in the world. According to her, he was often controlling of Linda, and if things did not go as planned, Linda was responsible for everything. She also admitted that she always felt worried about her daughter. On January 7, 2007, in rural Lawrence, Michigan, a fire broke out in the home of Todd and Linda Stermer. It was a normal Sunday afternoon. She was washing towels in the basement, while her husband, Todd, was watching TV in the living room. At around 3 p.m., she heard her husband screaming from the living room. When she rushed to check, she found the living room consumed by flames. Todd was in the middle of the room, desperately trying to extinguish the fire. Although she couldn't see him clearly through the flames, she could hear his screams. She rushed out of the burning house without taking her shoes, coat, or phone, all of which were left inside. Without a phone to call for help, she took her husband's truck and drove to the nearest place to seek help. Linda got into the truck, which had the keys in it. Weather reports indicated light rain mixed with snow that day, and she said the roads were wet and muddy. This made it difficult to get the van moving. As the tires spun in place and the clutch struggled to engage while trying to maneuver the van, she suddenly noticed through the side window that Todd had emerged from the burning house. She yelled for him to get in the car, but he didn't listen. He was badly burned. She rushed out of the truck, ran to him and yelled, telling him to lie down on the ground to put out the fire on his body and clothes. Linda then got back in the car and drove to Todd, then took him to the hospital. However, as she drove, she lost sight of him and had no idea where he had gone. Near the house, the ground was muddy and slippery, making it difficult to control the car. In addition, the truck's tires were old and worn. Despite the difficulty, she still tried to move the car slowly and carefully to get closer to the house. She steered the truck onto a sandy road, hoping that the surface would give the truck better traction. Meanwhile, neighbors called 911 to report the fire and rushed to help. They approached Linda, asked where Todd and her sons were, but she was so frightened that she could not answer clearly. She pointed toward the front door, saying the last time she saw Todd, He was near that area. The neighbors searched where she had indicated, but couldn't find him. After circling the burning house, they discovered he lying on the side of the house. Near where Linda had left the van, he was on his back, with his head facing the house. Linda said she had no idea how her husband, Todd, ended up in that location. He was severely burned, and most of his clothes had been destroyed by the fire. Although still alive, he was unable to speak. Linda ran to him, crying and pleading for him not to leave her. Shortly after, police, firefighters, and paramedics arrived. Rescue workers tried to save Todd, but his injuries were so severe that they couldn't attach a defibrillator. Sadly, 42 years old, Todd Stermer died near his home from extensive burns and carbon monoxide poisoning. Upon further investigation, police discovered blood on the bumper and undercarriage of the van. It was determined that Linda had accidentally run over her husband, Todd. However, she maintained that she didn't know how or when it occurred, insisting it was not intentional. After the fire was extinguished, detectives launched an investigation. They thoroughly examined the scene and interviewed close friends, neighbors, and the two sons, Trevor and Trenton, who lived in the family home. Trevor and Trenton claimed to know their mother, Linda, well and suspect that the story of the fire is not simple. They believed that she was hiding something. Trevor directly asked his mother if she had crashed her car into Todd. She deflected, saying she did not want to discuss it, and then burst into tears. The brothers could not believe that their father, Todd, who was in excellent health, could have been so severely injured in the fire. While she was completely unharmed, they also disclosed that their parents' relationship had been deteriorating recently. Todd and Linda frequently argued and had even talked about getting a divorce. Just a day before the fire, they had a heated argument. The fight started after Todd accused Linda of being unfaithful. She vehemently denied this and insisted that she had always been faithful to her husband. However, she admitted that they had argued the day before, but said it was over money. The Stermer family is having a lot of financial trouble, and Linda blames Todd for it. He runs a glove and sometimes suits business, but Linda accused him of being lazy and unwilling to work. She recently discovered that he had borrowed money from his mother, which led her to confront him. She questioned why he needed the money and why he didn't work harder to earn it. Linda works at a dialysis center and has a very busy schedule. She wakes up at 5 a.m. every day to go to work, according to the news. Todd is in debt of about $75. He hasn't paid his mortgage in months and spends most of his income on personal expenses. However, Trevor and Trenton believe that their mother, Linda, is also responsible for the family's financial difficulties. According to Trevor and Trenton, Linda often uses all of her family's savings for her hobby of horses. She was obsessed with the animals and owned up to 30 horses. Todd was very upset that his wife spent so much time, effort, and money on them. She had a credit card with a limit of $25, and she often spent it all. Therefore, they often argued about this issue. Despite this, she believed that she could make money from those horses. She also admitted that Todd threatened her, warning that if the horses did not produce profit, he would find a way to get rid of them. As investigators questioned Linda, they became more and more suspicious of her. They began to carefully examine her every move that day. It turned out that she had stopped by a gas station early in the morning, according to the clerk. She did not put gas in the car, but in a tank. This was later confirmed when police found an empty gas canister in the courtyard of her house, which still contained traces of gasoline. Linda explained that she had run out of milk that morning, so she went grocery shopping and stopped by the gas station. She presented a receipt showing she spent only $11 on gas. She claimed she didn't need to fill her SUV's tank completely, adding just enough to ensure her sons had fuel for an upcoming trip. Upon returning home, she said she woke her sons, encouraged them to take her SUV, and arranged for them to go to the movies with a friend. She gave them both money and the car keys. Linda told investigators that she had expected to have an argument with her husband that day, so she didn't want her sons to hear it. She frankly admitted that she intended to tell her husband about her plans for divorce and had seriously considered it. Even seeing a lawyer, she had planned to pack up and leave the house that day. She also shared that the decision was not easy, as she and her husband had been officially together for 13 years. Detectives spent 2 years investigating and concluded that Linda drove her truck into her husband, Todd, after he fled their burning home on June 5, 2009. Prosecutors believed they had sufficient evidence to arrest Linda on charges of arson and her husband's murder. She appeared in court on January 5, 2010. The evidence was primarily circumstantial, focusing on Linda's behavior before and after the fire. Their sons, Trevor and Trenton, testified that on that Sunday morning, she urgently forced them to leave for the cinema and did not let them say goodbye to their father, claiming he was asleep. In court, they suggested that their mother may have given their father a high dose of sedatives or illegal substances. This theory was supported by Linda's former friend and co-worker, Kate Fox. Kate said that, after the tragedy, Linda once confessed that she was afraid investigators would find the coffee cup she used to mix the banned substance for Todd. However, autopsy results did not detect any signs that Todd was under the influence of banned substances. Kate also claimed that Linda had previously discussed ways to get rid of her husband, Todd, including hitting him with a car. She denied these allegations, stating that Kate disliked her due to workplace conflicts. Additionally, Kate brought up her affair with a colleague, Chris Williams. Chris confirmed their romantic relationship and stated it began before the tragedy, while she admitted to the affair. She insisted it only started after she became a widow. She accused Kate of inciting Chris to lie in court to get back at her. In addition, her lawyer presented evidence that Kate was mentally ill while in custody. Some of Linda's cellmates reported that she admitted to starting a fire in her house while Todd was asleep. Another inmate claimed that Linda told them she had hit Todd in the head. Prosecutors argued that she doused Todd in gasoline while he was sleeping and set him on fire. Gasoline traces were found on his sweatpants, underwear, and socks. However, gasoline was also found on the clothes of a neighbor who had covered Todd with his jacket while he lay on the ground. Moreover, gasoline traces were detected on a towel Linda was reportedly washing in the basement before the fire. She claimed Todd had been working on the stove that day and spilled fuel oil on the towel. She explained that the towel smelled bad, so she attempted to wash it. Linda's lawyer argued that Todd had set the fire himself and died because of his own actions. No traces of gasoline were found on her clothing. Additionally, it was revealed that he had previously been suspected of arson twice. 2 of his houses had mysteriously burned down, both times when he was in debt and facing financial troubles. However, the prosecutor dismissed these claims, emphasizing that after Todd escaped the burning house, Linda hit him with her car and failed to call 911. The prosecutor accused she of being a liar, manipulator, and even referred to her as a devil. In 2010, 3 years after Todd Stermer's death, the judge delivered the verdict. Linda Stermer was found guilty of arson and first-degree murder. This ruling has caused serious conflict within the family. Todd's sons, Trevor and Trenton, supported their late father, while the daughters sided with their mother. Linda, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite this, she continued to fight for her freedom for the next 5 years. Linda appealed several times to the state court and the Michigan Supreme Court, but all were denied. She then filed a petition in federal court, arguing that her attorney's failure to hire a fire investigation expert hurt her case. An experienced fire investigator has criticized the investigation at the Stermer home, calling it a shoddy one. The expert said that police did not collect enough combustible material for analysis, and there was no evidence that Linda poured gasoline on Todd and set him on fire. In 2016, Linda's new attorney filed an amended petition that included findings from a fire expert 2 years later, in October 2018, a federal judge granted a retrial. During the proceedings, Linda suggested that a coal might have accidentally fallen from their living room fireplace, igniting the floor and starting the fire 2 months later. Just before Christmas 2018, the judge announced his decision. He ruled that the prosecutor had been wrong to tell the jury that Linda had 2 cell phones. As there was no evidence to support this claim, the judge criticized Linda's defense team for failing to consult with a fire expert, which was detrimental to her. The judge also noted that while Kate testified against Linda, she suffered from mental health issues, raising doubts about the credibility of testimony. In December 2018, nearly 12 years after the fire, Linda's conviction was overturned, and she was released from prison. By that time, she had served about 9 years. In 2019, about a year after her release, the Michigan Attorney General appealed to reinstate Linda's conviction. Her daughters were terrified that their mother might be sent back to prison. On December 3, 2019, Linda, her daughters, and her mother attended the hearing. This time, the focus shifted away from the fire and onto the fact that Linda had run over her husband with her car. Linda maintained that she did not hit Todd intentionally. She explained that she had been in a state of panic and was unsure how or when it happened. She insisted that she never intended to harm or kill her husband. In 2020, the appeals court ruled in Linda's favor, upholding the judge's decision to vacate her conviction. However, the prosecutor's office continues to pursue the case while awaiting the outcome. Linda attends all hearings and appreciates the freedom she now enjoys. She now lives with her daughter Ashley, works to save money, and dreams of one day buying a new home. However, her sons, Trevor and Trenton, no longer call her mom. To them, she is just Linda. They do not forgive her for the death of their father, Todd, even after her release. They still believe that she is responsible for their father's death. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was born in 1980 in Toronto into a large and close-knit family. There were 5 children in the family, and Brett was the second. He had 2 older brothers, Christopher and Leland, and a younger brother, AJ. Brett's parents always tried to instill the right values in their children by promoting a healthy lifestyle. Brett's father worked at a newspaper and was also a fitness trainer. His mother dedicated herself to homemaking and loved growing flowers. Brett's mother could be strict and harsh in raising her 4 sons, while his father was gentle and reserved. Each son in the family pursued his own path. After graduating from high school, Brett enrolled at the University of Toronto. However, he quickly struggled with his studies. After 2 painful breakups, Brett could not concentrate on his studies and eventually decided to drop out of university. Brett felt jealous as he watched his friends and classmates build relationships, get married, and achieve success in life. Meanwhile, he felt like he was not accomplishing anything significant, which made him feel like a failure. After getting a job as a painter, he realized that this career was not suitable for him. At the same time, Brett was concerned about his appearance, spending a lot of money on personal needs and on girls. As a result, he accumulated a large debt of up to 60,000 Canadian dollars, which he had no way to repay. When creditors started demanding money, Brett fell into a deep depression. He felt like a complete failure but did not dare to confess his problems to anyone. In desperation, Brett was determined to find a way out of his difficult situation and make a large sum of money quickly. He decided to rob a bank. On October 20, 2007, he put his plan into action. He chose a bank near his home and created a disguise by covering his face with bandages, pretending to have an injured left arm, limping, and carrying a stack of papers. Brett robbed his first bank by pretending to be sick. He entered and approached the cash register. There, he handed over a note demanding cash and warned the clerk that he was hiding a weapon. Out of fear, the clerk quickly gave Brett the money in the cash register. The amount was only about $1,000, which Brett was not happy about, but he decided not to attract any more attention. So he took the money and left the scene. Brett was caught on security cameras during the robbery. Despite this, he was not caught initially because he avoided using the same technique and changed his disguise each time. Instead of using fake bandages to look like a sick person, he wore a fake beard and hat to hide his identity. His next bank robberies achieved different results. Throughout his 12 bank robberies, Brett accumulated more than $28,000 in cash. He was always evasive, trying to avoid the police. Finally, on June 20, 2008, the police identified Brett, and he was arrested during his 13th attempted robbery. This surprised everyone because Brett had previously volunteered at a children's hospital and was now a robber. Brett was sentenced to 5 years in prison. During his sentence, experts conducted psychological evaluations and concluded that he showed no signs of aggression or violence. Additionally, Brett did not use illegal substances and did not suffer from mental disorders during his sentence. After 2 years, Brett was paroled for good behavior. The prison staff were impressed with him because he was a pleasant, charismatic, and hardworking young man. They felt that he had only made one serious mistake due to the pressure of debt and deserved the second chance. Brett's record showed that he was a model prisoner with a low risk of reoffending. Upon his release, Brett was required to attend a course of psychotherapy and report any problems he encountered in his family relationships or at work. This helped him avoid reoffending. However, the reality turned out to be much more complicated than Brett had anticipated. The debts were still outstanding, and he could not pay them off. Finding a job was also difficult because no one wanted to hire an ex-convict, even though he had skills in painting. In desperation, Brett declared bankruptcy. Fortunately, his parents supported him financially, allowing him to continue his studies at university, this time in information technology. Brett also continued to see a psychologist under court order and tried to stabilize his life. During therapy, Brett was advised to be more open and honest with the people around him. In September 2011, a friend of Brett's arranged a blind date with a girl named Kristen Baxter. Kristen was a physical therapist, lived alone in an apartment, and had a small dog. She also loved to travel. When Brett met Kristen, they immediately had a special connection. They quickly found they were compatible and attracted to each other. They both loved animals and traveling, which created a bond between them. Not long after, Brett and Kristen began a romantic relationship. Brett and Kristen spent a lot of time together, attending sporting events and hiking. They also went on a vacation together in the Bahamas with Kristen's family. Kristen's dog immediately took a liking to Brett, which made a good impression. Brett's life seemed to be back on track, and he no longer exhibited suspicious behavior. He longed for a quiet and cozy life with his beloved girlfriend. When Brett moved into Kristen's apartment in January 2013, their relationship entered a new phase. They began thinking about getting married. However, Brett was hiding a truth from Kristen. In reality, he was not the person she thought he was. While Brett's brothers were building their careers and becoming independent, he was just studying and living off his parents' money. He hid his real life and focused only on enjoying the vibrant city life with Kristen. They enjoyed going to cozy restaurants and swimming in the pool at night, but Brett never revealed the truth about his circumstances. Brett and Kristen often traveled to warm countries. However, their lives were turned upside down when Brett's father suddenly passed away. Brett moved in with his mother to help with the funeral arrangements and support her during this difficult time. During this period, Brett confessed to his mother, Susan, that he loved Kristen very much and dreamed of marrying her. However, he did not have enough money to buy a decent engagement ring, so he hesitated to propose. Brett's mother was touched by her son's words and gave him money to buy an expensive ring. With a luxurious diamond ring, Brett proposed to Kristen, and she accepted. The couple began to prepare for their wedding. However, Brett still had many worries about the future. He didn't know how he would support his family. He also had legal issues, bankruptcy, and debt that he hadn't disclosed to Kristen. To address these issues, Brett decided to focus on finding a decent, stable job. In early 2016, Brett finally found a good job in the IT field. He was very happy to share this news with Kristen, and they decided to celebrate with their families. However, everything changed when his new employer learned about his criminal past and fired him immediately. This took a serious toll on Brett's self-esteem. To avoid upsetting Kristen, Brett decided not to tell her about this failure. Instead, he lied and said that he would work remotely from home. Every day, when Kristen went to work, Brett would pretend to work on the computer. Kristen was very happy, thinking that Brett would start earning a lot of money and they would be able to stand on their own. Kristen started preparing for the wedding scheduled for September 16, 2016. She chose the most beautiful and expensive options they could afford. A luxurious banquet hall was booked for the ceremony, and the bachelor party before the wedding was to be held at a luxurious ski resort. The couple even started looking for a spacious and cozy house to settle down in after the wedding, as they were tired of living in a small apartment. Susan was extremely happy, thinking that her son was independent, had graduated from college, and had a high-paying job. She looked forward to the day when her son would get married and move into his own house. But the reality was completely the opposite. Brett had lied about all of this. He was trapped in his own fabricated thoughts and could not get out. In an effort to earn money, Brett took on any side job he could and even helped his mother with housework to earn money. He went to see his mother every day, looking for things to do and fixing things to get paid. Susan became suspicious when she saw her son hanging around the house all day, constantly doing this and that instead of going to work. If Brett made as much money as he claimed, why did he need these odd jobs? Susan began to ask her son difficult questions, which Brett initially tried to avoid. But then he remembered his therapist's advice about the importance of honesty, and finally dared to confess his troubles to his mother. He begged his mother for significant financial support, promising to continue looking for work. However, his mother was extremely disappointed and angry when she learned the truth. She refused to give him any money and threatened to tell Kristen everything. Brett was extremely angry at his mother's harsh words, and he feared that Kristen would leave him if she found out the truth. Brett was desperate because he didn't want to lose his girlfriend and have to move back in with his mother. He feared that if that happened, he would feel like a loser for the rest of his life. So he decided to carry out a strange plan. Unable to legally purchase a gun due to his criminal record, Brett chose to purchase a crossbow to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. He purchased the old crossbow with cash. The next day, Brett returned to his mother's house under the pretext of helping with home repairs to earn money. However, he had other intentions. On August 25, 2016, his mother, Kristen, woke up early as usual and went to work. Meanwhile, Brett stayed home and pretended to work. In reality, he was preparing for another act. To avoid suspicion, Brett created a keystroke automaton on his computer to give the impression that he was working. He also set up an automatic email function to send at a specific time to create an alibi. Next, Brett gathered all the necessary items for his disguise into a gym bag, including clothes and a wig. To avoid being caught on surveillance cameras, he sneaked out of the house through the fire escape and went to Susan's house incognito, wearing clothes and a wig so that no one would recognize him. However, when he reached the door, he took off all his disguises and went inside. Once inside, Brett tried to convince his mother to give him money. But Susan continued to refuse. A fierce argument broke out between them, with Susan demanding that Brett confess his lie to Kristen. Otherwise, she would expose him herself. As the argument became more heated, Susan sensed something was wrong. She took advantage of the moment when Brett stepped outside and called her eldest son, Chris. She begged Chris to come and help resolve the conflict with Brett. Brett returned to the garage for an important reason. He had hidden a crossbow there earlier. Once he found the weapon, he began to prepare everything for the shot. However, this required more time and effort than he had imagined. At that moment, his mother entered the garage in a rage. Brett quickly found a nearby tool and struck her twice, hitting her in the cheek and ear. She screamed in pain and shock at the sight of her own son attacking her. A fight broke out between them. During the scuffle, both fell to the floor and rolled around, knocking over everything in their path. In the chaos, Brett found a long, dirty rag, and without thinking much, he used it to strangle her. Only after carrying out this act did Brett realize that things had gone terribly wrong. His original murder plan had turned into a nightmare. He remembered that his brother Chris, who had been called by their mother, was about to arrive at the garage. Brett decided to remove his brother from the list of potential witnesses. He jumped up, grabbed the crossbow, and started preparing. A plan to kill Chris formed in Brett's mind. After preparing everything for the new crime, Brett hid in the garage, waiting for Chris. Soon, Chris entered the garage to find their mother, not knowing that he was in danger. Brett quietly approached Chris from behind and shot him in the back of the head. Chris fell immediately. Brett dragged his body close to their mother's and covered it with a tarp. Brett quickly changed his clothes and prepared to run away. However, he did not expect that his younger brother, AJ, was visiting and appeared at the door. For Brett, this was a disastrous situation. Brett began to consider his next move: run away after changing his clothes or stay and kill AJ. He feared that when his brother discovered the bodies, AJ would immediately call the police and he would be arrested. This fear drove Brett to commit another murder. After finding AJ, Brett followed him. Brett approached AJ with the intention of shooting him in the back of the head, just as he had done to Chris. However, this time things did not go as planned. AJ sensed danger and noticed that Brett was carrying a weapon. A scuffle broke out between the two brothers. During the fight, Brett attempted to injure AJ by shooting him in the neck with the crossbow. AJ screamed in pain and fled. He ran out of the house, leaving a trail of blood in the sand, and eventually collapsed from exhaustion in the driveway. It was then that Brett learned that there was another brother sleeping in the house, Leland, 39. He was awakened by AJ's terrified screams. Leland looked out the window and saw his brother covered in blood on the road. Panicked, he rushed to the phone to call 911 but couldn't make it. At that moment, Brett rushed at him in a frenzy. Leland and Brett started a fierce fight, spreading throughout the house and turning it into a bloody mess. Taking advantage of Brett's distraction, Leland sneaked out without being detected. He crawled to the neighbor's house and passed out right in front of it. The kind neighbors immediately called the police. Meanwhile, Brett angrily ran back to the yard and saw AJ, injured, trying to crawl away. Obsessed with the desire to kill his brother, Brett chased after AJ before the neighbors discovered him. However, while chasing AJ, Brett was surprised to find that Leland had told the neighbors everything. From that moment on, Brett had no chance to save himself. The police were about to arrive at the crime scene and put an end to his bloody journey. Brett's murder plan had failed. In desperation, Brett decided to surrender and returned to the house. There, he sat on the porch, holding a bottle of water, and waited for the police to arrive. When the police and ambulance arrived, paramedics confirmed that their mother and Chris had passed away. AJ still had signs of life, but his condition was critical. However, on the way to the hospital, AJ passed away due to his injuries. Leland, despite his serious injuries, survived. He was taken to the hospital for treatment and medical attention and gradually began to recover. Meanwhile, Brett was arrested at the scene of the crime and faced serious charges of first-degree murder and attempted murder of his brother. The news left Kristen reeling, especially since their wedding was only 3 weeks away. Kristen was devastated when she learned the truth about her lover. Brett's criminal past, including a robbery conviction, financial hardship, unemployment, and the horrific murder of his family, left her in disbelief. She wondered how she could have lived with this man all this time without knowing the truth. Kristen immediately called off the wedding and returned to her apartment. There, she discovered a strange device that Brett had made to create an alibi. Mistaking it for an explosive device, she panicked and called the police. The police quickly arrived at the scene, evacuated the residents of the building, and began to carefully examine the mysterious device. After a short time, they discovered that the device was just a clever invention of Brett's. Although initially concerned about the danger, the police later realized that the device was harmless. However, they were impressed by Brett's extraordinary ingenuity and care. His intelligence and inner strength were undeniable, but unfortunately, he used them for the wrong purpose. At trial, Brett pleaded guilty and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted that his actions constituted second-degree murder and hoped for a lighter sentence. Brett explained that he only intended to use the crossbow to scare his mother and have a serious talk with her. He wanted his mother to finally understand and support him, but things got out of hand. Brett claimed that he had no intention of hurting his brothers. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The prosecution believed that the defendant had planned to harm his mother from the beginning, not just stop at a conversation. They argued that Brett had brought the crossbow with the intention of killing Susan and should be held strictly responsible. As a result, he was convicted of first-degree murder of his mother and second-degree murder of his brother. The court handed down harsh sentences, 3 life terms with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In addition, Brett was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the attempted murder of his brother Leland. All sentences were to run concurrently, meaning he could only apply for early release after a quarter of a century. Brett's only surviving brother, Leland, received the sentence with relief. Despite the pain and bitterness of the loss, Leland truly respected Brett's remorse. In Leland's mind, his brother was not a bad person at heart but had lost his way in life. Brett had taken the path of deceit and was eventually mired in the quagmire of his own lies. He could no longer get out, which led to a terrible tragedy. Brett Ryan's terrifying story serves as a warning to us all. It demonstrates that small lies and the concealment of truth can lead to dire consequences. When we continue to lie, the lies grow and accumulate, becoming unmanageable. As a result, not only is the liar's life ruined, but so are the lives of their loved ones. Brett Ryan had the opportunity to change after his first prison sentence. He had the support of his girlfriend and a loving family, and he could have gone to school and found a job. However, he chose to lie, leading to a disastrous outcome and ruining more than one life. Whether Brett truly admitted his mistake or just wanted a lighter sentence is not as important as the lessons he learns while serving his life sentence. Can he look back on his life, reflect on his mistakes, and strive to become a better version of himself? Only Brett knows the answer. However, his story certainly makes us reflect on our own actions. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vera Pekteleva. Vera Pekteleva was born on September 24, 1997, in Kelos, Kovo Oblast. She grew up to be a cheerful, creative, and talented individual who excelled in singing competitions during her school years. Despite her parents, Oksana and Yvonne, divorcing while she was still in school, Vera maintained a good relationship with both of them and their new partner. People who knew her described Vera as kind, positive, and avoiding conflict. After graduating from high school, Vera surprised her family by enrolling in the State Technical University in Kovo instead of pursuing a career in the arts. Her mother, Oksana, lived in Kisilov, about 110 miles from Kovo, and Vera would visit her during her free time. During one of these visits in 2016, Vera met Vladislav Kanyus, a young man her age. Vladislav was her opposite in many ways. He lacked direction, was introverted, and had a quick temper. He had dropped out of school after 9th grade and came from a troubled home. His mother had abandoned the family, leaving him to live with his father, who had legal problems and eventually took his own life in front of Vladislav. This traumatic experience had a lasting impact on Vladislav's life. Vera and Vladislav's relationship was unlikely, as they had little in common. Despite this, Vera fell in love with him. However, her parents were strongly opposed to the relationship due to Vladislav's troubled past. They wanted a better life for Vera and disapproved of her choice. Vera's mother, Oksana, stated that they waited for Vera to end the relationship, but instead, she stopped talking about Vladislav with them. Vladislav was never invited to family gatherings and did not appear in Vera's social media photos, making it seem like she was hiding him. In 2019, Vera and Vladislav moved in together in Kovo, with her parents helping to pay for the apartment. Although Vladislav was unemployed and had no intention of changing that, he enjoyed living with Vera, who was beautiful, smart, and financially stable. As a result, she supported him. The relationship was tense, and Vladislav's alcohol abuse was a major concern. Vera's parents suspected that Vladislav was physically abusing her as well. Vera ended her toxic relationship with Vladislav in November 2019 with the help of her parents, who assisted her in paying for a new apartment. Logically, Vladislav should have moved out, but he refused to do so, as he enjoyed living at someone else's expense. According to Vladislav's testimony, he and Vera had a fight on December 15, 2019, because he wanted to go to a nightclub, but she declined. Vladislav claimed that during their relationship, Vera began to distance herself from him, often traveling to Kalos, and eventually admitting to communicating with someone else. Keep in mind that this is Vladislav's testimony, and it's up to you to decide how credible his words are. According to Vladislav, a month before their breakup, Vera told him she was leaving him. Later, he found out from a mutual friend that she was already seeing someone else, a guy named Alexander from Selos. He didn't know Alexander personally. After learning this, he wanted to talk to Vera about it. They were still living together in the same apartment at the time. On December 15, 2019, they had a fight and she left, taking some of her things with her. Even though they weren't together anymore, they stayed in touch by phone. On January 12, 2020, he called Vera and offered to help her move her remaining belongings to a new place. She agreed, and they planned to meet up the next day to do the move. When January 13th came around, Vera showed up, and they packed up both her stuff and his, since he was planning to move out of the apartment too. He didn't want to stay there without her. On January 13th, 2020, Vladislav and Vera consumed beer, lure, and vodka while packing. They both became intoxicated. Despite their inebriated state, they did not argue during the drinking session, which continued until 5 a.m. on January 14th, 2020. However, a conflict emerged when Vladislav brought up their relationship and suggested they get back together. He also confronted her about seeing another guy, which Vera denied. This led to an altercation, during which Vera became aggressive, swearing, insulting, and physically attacking Vladislav. She kicked him in the groin area at least 5 times and slapped him in the face at least 8 times. Although he didn't feel pain from the slaps, the kicks caused him physical discomfort. Vladislav claimed that Vera's aggression was triggered by his discovery of her infidelity, which made him angry. Vera, on the other hand, accused him of prying into her personal life and continued to insult him. This is the version of events as told by Vladislav to the police. However, there are reasons to believe that Vladislav's testimony may not be entirely truthful. Vera was determined to move out of the apartment she shared with Vladislav and wanted no part in drinking with him. She asked her friend to assist her with the move and sent a voice message at 5:08 p.m., saying she was already packing her belongings and would be at her new apartment by 6 p.m. She requested her friend's help in transporting her belongings from the taxi to the new apartment. However, just 3 minutes later, Vera sent another voice message inviting her friend to come to her current apartment to help with the move. But before she could finish, Vladislav intervened, stating that no one was allowed in the apartment, effectively blocking her friend from coming. The situation was escalating, and at 5:15 p.m., Vera sent a quiet, low-voiced message to her friend, seemingly a distress call, as she attempted to keep it from Vladislav's ears. 10 minutes later, at 5:25 p.m., Vera sent another voice message, but this time Vladislav's voice could be heard, instructing Vera's friend not to bother them and to wait for Vera to text her. By 7:19 p.m., Vladislav had taken control, sending a voice message himself. From that point on, Vera was silenced, and her friend no longer heard from her. It seemed that Vera was trapped alone with Vladislav. The night took a dark turn when, at around 3 a.m., the neighbors on the same floor were awoken by blood-curdling screams coming from apartment 738. A bystander described the unfolding tragedy as a massacre. The screams from the apartment were so loud that 15 people, including Vladislav's brother, gathered in the hallway. Vladislav's brother recalled his brother's previous threats to harm Vera and realized they needed to intervene. Since the door was made of iron, the neighbors searched for tools to pry it open. Meanwhile, Vera's desperate cries for help continued to echo from the apartment. The bystanders called the emergency service multiple times, but their calls were ultimately part of a separate investigation. Despite the repeated calls, the police failed to arrive for 30 minutes until 6:30 a.m. During this agonizing period, the neighbors made 7 emergency calls, but no help came. The last words they heard from Vladislav were, "Vera, forgive me, I love you very much." Finally, the neighbors found a crowbar in a nearby parking lot and broke down the door. Tragically, they found Vera dead and Vladislav, who was heavily intoxicated, in the bathroom. Meanwhile, the 112 operators were indifferent to the emergency calls, chatting, laughing, and drinking tea, complaining about being disturbed as Vera lay dying at the hands of her former boyfriend. The police did not arrive at the scene until after Vera's death had been reported. They later justified their delayed response by claiming that one of their patrol cars had no gas and that all available officers were busy handling other emergency calls. As a result, the operators who handled the 112 emergency calls and the police officers on duty that night were also put on trial. A police station video was made public, showing officers displaying a shocking lack of urgency. Vladislav Konyus initially claimed that he and Vera didn't have any conflicts until 5 a.m., but forensic evidence disputed this, showing that he had lied. In reality, Vera's first injury occurred around midnight, which meant that Vladislav had brutally beaten and injured her for 6 hours before she eventually died. The autopsy results were shocking, revealing a total of 100 injuries on Vera's body, including stab wounds, a broken nose and ribs, and evidence of strangulation around her neck. The community was outrageously upset, and more than 1,000 people attended her funeral, exceeding the church's capacity. Vera's mother, Oksana, was left devastated by the unrecognizable state of her daughter's body, which required an extensive 4-hour restoration process at the funeral home. At the same time, Vladislav was providing a false account to investigators, trying to downplay his role in the vicious crime. The indictment alleges that the police officers were negligent in their response to the situation. They had access to gasoline, but even if they didn't, they should have taken necessary steps to resolve the issue. However, they didn't treat the situation as urgent and failed to take prompt action. Furthermore, The two police officers refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any wrongdoing. Their defense was that when witnesses reported the screams and cries for help, the investigation team was already occupied at a different location where a corpse had been discovered earlier. In 2022, Vladislav Kanyus was sentenced to 17 years in prison after admitting partial guilt. He was also ordered to pay $45,000 in compensation. Vera's parents were shocked by the leniency of the sentence and planned to appeal. However, Vladislav didn't serve his full sentence. In April 2023, it was discovered that he had received a presidential pardon after serving just 6 months in prison. Furthermore, photos of him in military uniform surfaced online in November 2023. Vladislav Kanyus, the person responsible for Vera's death, was not only pardoned but also relieved of the obligation to pay compensation to her parents. The news sparked widespread outrage in Russia. The press secretary of the Russian president explained the pardoning procedure, stating that it involves a series of steps. First, the convict must confess to their crime. Then, the request for pardon is reviewed at multiple levels, including the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Regional, Federal District, and Central Commission, before reaching the president. Alternatively, convicts can also redeem themselves by fighting on the battlefield, where they risk their lives under fire. This alternative path to redemption is difficult to accept, especially for Vera's parents, who were devastated to learn that Kanyus was free to start anew while their daughter would never have that chance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1st, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Stephen was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Stephen attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on many plays for her family and neighbors. Stephen and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Stephen updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Stephen worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Stephen and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Stephen was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Stephen would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Stephen the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Stephen, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Stephen in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Stephen. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Stephen, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Stephen that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Stephen or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Stephen and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Stephen told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Stephen. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Stephen refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Stephen as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Stephen's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Stephen was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described Stephen as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Stephen. Another witness, Alicia Varela, who worked with Stephen, testified that Mary would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Stephen. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Stephen came home, and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Stephen Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, those who knew Stephen Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Stephen Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Stephen's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Stephen Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Stephen had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. He was always smiling, hugging, and staying close to those he cared about. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She had an older sister named Lynn. During her 2010 university break, Catherine met Rafal Novak, a 31-year-old employee, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafal, a tall, handsome blonde from Poland, caught her attention. He had moved to England about 4 years earlier, leaving behind a former wife and son. Catherine and Rafal started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site's cafe. However, their lunches soon turned into romantic dinners. Rafal wooed Catherine with thoughtful gestures, such as giving her beautiful bouquets, taking her to movies, and going on walks together. As they grew closer, Rafal opened up to Catherine about his past life and his reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting nature led her to open up completely to the blonde man, Rafal Novak. Their relationship accelerated rapidly, and within a few months, she introduced him to her parents, who warmly welcomed him into the family and hoped for their future happiness together. As their relationship blossomed, the couple began planning their wedding, which was set to take place in 2011. After graduating with honors from Bath Spa University, Catherine secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly excelled in her career, generating job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine's exceptional qualities, including her intelligence, education, and people skills, made her a remarkable leader. She was empathetic towards her colleagues, always willing to lend a helping hand, and her kind gaze and radiant smile earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. As Catherine's career soared, her substantial earnings, combined with Rafal's, enabled them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace on Willow Way. Catherine and Raphael, a young couple with successful careers, bought a house with a mortgage and secured insurance coverage through their agreement with the bank. They seemed to have everything they needed for happiness. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on September 12, 2012, a day that would be a turning point in their lives. As the investigation into their lives progressed, new and surprising facts came to light. These revelations slowly exposed the deception that had been present in their relationship from the beginning. It turned out that Raphael, 29, had fled Poland to escape significant debts, leaving behind a wife and child. He moved to the UK, where he began a relationship with Anna Lovich in 2008. Later, he met Catherine Welsber, and for a time, he saw both women. Ultimately, he chose Catherine, seeing her as a more suitable partner for building a family and achieving financial stability. Catherine had genuine dreams of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family. However, Novak, her partner, was secretly planning to murder her. He intended to use the life insurance payout and inherit their large house, which Catherine had partially paid for. On the day Catherine disappeared, Novak waited a few hours before approaching her boss, pretending to be worried and distraught. He acted convincingly, deceiving her colleagues and relatives. When Catherine could not be found at her parents' home or her own, and her car was missing, Novak fabricated a story about her receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. Her family then contacted the police. The family gathered in the young couple's living room, waiting for Catherine's return, when they received devastating news. A burning car with a body inside had been found. Raphael described the evening before her disappearance as uneventful, saying they went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, and watched TV together before bedtime. Catherine seemed normal and not frightened or distressed. However, further investigation revealed that Catherine's death occurred earlier than initially thought. She was strangled around 2 a.m. while sleeping in her own bed. Her body was then placed in the car, driven a short distance from the house, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Despite this, Raphael had a solid alibi, claiming he was at work from 5:30 a.m. and Catherine was still in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m., but a crucial detail emerged. Raphael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly changing the direction of the case. As a result, Raphael Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Welsber's murder. Evidence mounted against him, and he was detained for further investigation. Raphael claimed Catherine was being stalked by someone who had sent her threatening letters and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, proof of Catherine's secret online life was uncovered, revealing accounts on adult websites and intimate exchanges with men that her loved ones knew nothing about. A letter from a secret admirer was also found, but despite attempts to hide the truth, the evidence ultimately came to light. Raphael tried to mislead the investigation, but he made a critical mistake by not destroying key evidence that linked him directly to Catherine's death. This oversight gave the prosecution a motive to pursue. Examination of Novak's phone revealed that he had ongoing communication and meetings with Anna Lovich over the past few months. Further investigation revealed that Raphael also had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000, with each other as the sole beneficiaries. The significant life insurance payout emerged as the primary motive behind Catherine's murder and the arson of her car, which was intended to throw off the investigation. On the day Catherine disappeared, police found a message on Anna Lovich's phone from Catherine. They also discovered that Anna and her uncle had filled a gas canister at a gas station a few days before the crime. This led them to suspect Anna and her uncle, Todd Dmitry Shin, of being involved in Catherine's disappearance and trying to cover their tracks with arson. The investigation revealed that Anna, her uncle, and a third person had planned the crime meticulously over several months. They created fake accounts on pornographic websites, uploaded doctored photos of Catherine, and fabricated conversations with men to mislead the investigation. However, when confronted with the evidence, Anna and her uncle eventually cracked and started pointing fingers at each other. Anna accused Novak of killing someone for insurance money, while Novak claimed Anna did it out of jealousy towards a rival. The true culprits crafted a deceitful narrative around an innocent young woman, Catherine. They created fake online profiles for her, suggesting she was looking for casual sexual encounters. To cover their tracks, the conspirators went to great lengths to mislead investigators. They set Catherine's body on fire and fabricated a fake history for her, portraying her as a secretive and promiscuous person with many desires. They even created the illusion of a mysterious lover who might have killed her. One of them sent a text from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day she died, implying she was on her way to meet this fictional person. When forensic experts investigated the car fire, they found that Catherine was wearing her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have worn to meet a man, as she had claimed. This discovery led them to suspect that she was attacked in her own home rather than in the car. The police also found that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the remaining pillowcase had been recently washed and hung to dry. Further investigation revealed a SIM card in Anna Lovi's trash bin that was linked to the phone number Catherine had supposedly used to send texts that morning. Additionally, detectives discovered notes written by Lovi, indicating that she was trying to come up with ideas for messages to make it seem like Catherine was communicating with a mysterious person. As the evidence against them mounted, Novak and Linovich changed their story, claiming that Catherine's death was actually the work of a hired hitman. However, just before the trial began, Lovi attempted to create a distraction by having a fellow inmate pass on a fake confession from a supposed hitman who claimed to have been paid £20,000 by Novak to kill Catherine. Rafal Novak's girlfriend Catherine was murdered, and a fictional story written by Vinovich sheds light on the gruesome details. The story claims that Catherine's body was found in the trunk of her car, and the killer, supposedly a hitman, helped Novak stage her death to look like a murder-suicide. According to the story, Novak placed Catherine's body in the driver's seat, removed the tape from her mouth, put on her shoes, buckled her seatbelt, and kissed her goodbye before setting the car on fire. In reality, Novak played the role of a grieving boyfriend to perfection, even convincing Catherine's mother, Jane, of his innocence. He told her that Catherine was receiving threatening messages from an ex-boyfriend and that she had spoken of taking her own life. Novak's act was so convincing that Catherine's parents comforted him, unaware that he was responsible for their daughter's death. In fact, Catherine's mother even hugged Novak after her death and allowed him to call her mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. "I thought if Catherine loved him that much, and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back." The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The three defendants stood to gain a significant sum of money and property from Catherine Wells Burr's death. They had planned to receive a £123,000 life insurance payout and take ownership of her two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that Rafal Novak showed no emotional response when the police found Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12th. Meanwhile, Anna Lagvinovich frequently shook her head and laughed during the proceedings, implying that Novak was responsible for the crime. However, she refused to testify in her own defense. Dmitry Sheen also chose not to take the stand. According to reports, Judge Justice Sharp delivered a scathing rebuke to the defendants, in which she characterized the murder as a terrible, merciless crime that had been cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. Furthermore, it was reported that during sentencing, none of the three defendants displayed any emotion. Judge Sharp imposed mandatory life sentences on the three Polish nationals with a minimum of 32 years in prison and no possibility of early release. According to Judge Sharp, the defendants had taken the life of a beautiful young woman who had everything to live for, solely for financial gain. Judge Sharp specifically rebuked Rafal Novak, saying, "The photos of you holding Catherine's hand the evening before her death and buying groceries for what you knew was her last dinner are utterly chilling. your emotions were directed only at yourself. Turning to Anna Lagvinovich, Judge Sharp declared, "Your behavior was deceitful, manipulative, and cruel. You played your full part in this horrendous crime." The judge addressed Dmitry, stating that the murder was driven by financial gain, with aggravating circumstances and no mitigating factors. The judge emphasized that the only sympathy should be reserved for Catherine's family, including her mother Jane, father Philip, and sister Lynn, who have suffered greatly. The judge expressed deep condolences to Catherine's parents, noting that they were deceived by Rafal Novak's facade, unaware of his true nature, which was devoid of remorse and decency. The judge reiterated that the crime was motivated by greed, as Novak and Catherine had no personal ties, being neither married nor having children together. In contrast, the case of Anna Lavinovich was driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Catherine's mother was overcome with emotion in the courtroom as her statement was read, describing her daughter as a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing young woman. "My daughter had a bright and promising future with unlimited potential." As her parents, Phil and I couldn't help but feel immense pride in the young woman she was becoming. However, our lives were forever changed by the cruel and calculated act that took Catherine's life away from us. The hatred shown to her is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. I'm left with the unbearable pain of never having had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her how much I love her, or to hear her say, "I love you, Mommy," one last time. Catherine Wells Burr's father, Philip, was outraged that his daughter's boyfriend, Rafal Novak, had betrayed their trust. Novak had been living with them and was like a son, but he was accused of murdering Catherine. Despite his innocent claims, Novak showed no emotion when Catherine's body was found, and initially didn't mention her when questioned by police. Instead, he asked for a steak dinner. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells Burr, testified that she had concerns about Novak when he and Catherine bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believed Catherine's life was in danger and that she had signed her own death warrant by signing the mortgage. In the end, the jury found Novak guilty of murdering Catherine by suffocating her with a pillow while she slept. He had planned the murder with his secret lover, Anna Lagvinovich, and her uncle, Tavush Dmitry Shine, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share of the house. Vinovich and Sheen helped dispose of the body by transporting it in Vinovich's car to a remote location, where they set it on fire. Meanwhile, Novak had already started his workday, providing himself with an alibi. The three Polish nationals were found guilty of the crime by the Royal Court of Bristol. The events leading up to the murder involved secret meetings and phone calls between Novak and Vinovich, who were unaware that Catherine was involved in a love triangle. To mislead detectives, they created fake online profiles for Catherine on adult websites and sent her messages from a supposed mysterious admirer. Catherine's parents have called for stricter immigration controls following her death. They believe that if the UK had immigration rules as strict as those in the US, Novak, who was convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed into the country. The couple blames the European Union for the current lax entry measures for foreign nationals. Jane Wells Burr emphasized that people entering the UK are not properly vetted, pointing out that they were unaware of Novak's previous assault charge in Poland. Catherine's family members broke down in tears as the sentence was handed down in court, while the three convicted perpetrators remained emotionless. The trio received life sentences with no possibility of parole. In essence, the three immigrants from Poland had exchanged their aspirations for a successful and wealthy life for a lifetime of imprisonment due to their own actions. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother delivered a heartfelt tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful. She recalled her daughter's accomplishments and remembered her as determined, hardworking, and full of potential for a happy life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was raised in a loving and prosperous Canadian family with 3 brothers. His parents, Bill and Susan, set a positive example and taught their children valuable life lessons. Bill worked at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and had diverse interests, while Susan managed the household and cared for her family without outside help. The whole family admired Susan, who showed equal love to all her sons. Although Brett seemed to get in trouble less often, it was because he had a talent for talking his way out of difficult situations. He was charismatic and well-liked by his peers. Brett's charm earned him many friends in school, and he went on to attend university after high school. However, he felt pressure to outdo his brothers, so he started a house painting business in the local newspaper. Initially, he did well and made his mother proud, but eventually he realized that it wasn't as fulfilling as he thought and had to drop out of university to focus on it. As his brothers graduated and found jobs, Brett stayed behind with his parents and younger brother, accumulating debt and struggling with depression. By 2007, his debt had reached $60,000, and he struggled to manage his finances, hiding his troubles behind volunteer work and kindness. Desperate and broke, Brett decided to rob a bank on October 28, 2007. He disguised himself with old clothes, a hat, and a scarf that covered his face, and limped into the bank on the outskirts of his neighborhood. After threatening a bank employee, he left with just over $1,000, realizing he would need to rob many more banks to settle his debts. After his first robbery, he was worried that the police would catch up with him, so he avoided going home for a few days. He told his mother he had a job in a nearby town and spent his nights sleeping in his car, periodically sneaking back to his house to check if the police were watching. Fortunately, everything seemed quiet, and no one was looking for him, which made him feel like he was doing things right. As he continued to rob banks, Brett changed his appearance each time. He stopped wearing his old clothes and instead bought second-hand ones or found them in the trash. After each heist, he would burn the clothes he wore. He also bought a fake beard from a costume store to disguise himself. The bank employees he threatened always remembered the bearded man, which helped to create a false identity. The Toronto newspapers wrote about the bearded robber, but Brett never made a large sum of money from his crimes. The most he stole was $3,000. Eventually, his luck ran out, and the police spotted his car on surveillance cameras, following him all the way home. By then, they still didn't have concrete evidence to prove his guilt, so they decided to keep an eye on the suspect. For 15 days, Brett didn't commit any robberies, which was unusual since he typically struck every 3 or 4 days. The police were starting to think they had the wrong guy and were wasting their time. However, their luck changed when Brett left his house, got into a car, and later got out near a bank wearing a disguise. He entered the bank, stayed for a bit, and when he tried to exit, the police were waiting to arrest him. After months of searching, they finally caught the notorious bearded robber. Brett was investigated for 7 months and charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a permit to carry a gun, Brett never brought a weapon with him during his robberies, not even a kitchen knife. Brett was arrested and faced 19 charges, leading to a prison sentence. He, along with his family, filed multiple appeals, which resulted in 11 charges being dropped. Once eligible, Brett applied for parole and submitted a petition. In it, he explained that he had committed the crimes while struggling with severe depression, resulting from 2 failed relationships and significant debt. Brett emphasized that he had not used weapons and had no intention of harming anyone during the crimes. The parole board accepted his remarks, but required him to undergo a psychological evaluation. This had a positive impact on Brett, and he took the opportunity to reconnect with his family, with whom he had not communicated while incarcerated. The parole board noticed the positive changes in Brett and granted him early release on November 24, 2010. However, his newfound freedom was bittersweet and even more challenging than before. Before his imprisonment, Brett was a painter carrying emotional burdens. After his release, he was a bank robber and ex-convict with a tarnished reputation. After the robbery incident, Brett struggled to find a job due to his notorious reputation. Even people who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they recognized him as the bearded robber. To make matters worse, their neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and frequently visited, began spreading unpleasant rumors about the family. As a result, the Ryan family decided to sell their house and move to Scarborough. In their new location, Susan started a new garden and Brett managed to find a job at a trading company, although his salary was not high. Fortunately, his parents were able to support him financially as he worked to rebuild his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist who consistently advised him to maintain a close relationship with his family. This advice proved to be valuable. Despite this, Brett's financial situation remained a challenge. However, his life took a positive turn in September 2011 when he met Kristen Baxter, a wonderful young woman who owned an apartment with a beautiful sea view. She maintained a healthy lifestyle through sports and didn't concern herself with Brett's past. The couple enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son happy and believed Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential and become a responsible member of society. Brett's life was improving, but an unexpected event occurred that threatened to derail his progress. His father's sudden passing was a devastating blow, and Brett's depression began to resurface. To cope, he increased his visits to a psychologist and devoted more time to supporting his mother financially, although his own funds were limited. As their long-term relationship evolved, Brett knew it was time to take a significant step. No longer just careless teenagers, the young couple needed to build a life together. Deeply in love with Kristen, Brett decided to make a heartfelt proposal. He had saved up some money and discussed his plans with his mother, wanting to make the proposal unforgettable and impossible for Kristen to refuse. Susan understood what her son Brett was hinting at, so she gave him money to buy an engagement ring for his girlfriend Kristen. Previously, the couple had discussed their future together, and Kristen didn't need an extravagant gift to prove Brett's commitment. However, Brett wanted to make a grand gesture and purchased a gold ring with a large diamond for her. Needless to say, Kristen accepted his proposal. Once engaged, the couple began making wedding plans. Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was shocked by how expensive everything was and how it made him worried about his job security. This motivated him to find a well-paying job to support their future together. He discovered an engineering job opening at a large tech company, created a resume, and applied for the position. After a successful interview, he got the job, which thrilled him. Brett excitedly shared the news with Kristen and his mother, and he even asked his mother for money to buy a fancy suit for his new job. Brett's mother had agreed to buy him a suit for a job interview. However, just after the purchase, the company called to inform him that his application was rejected due to his criminal past, which the security service had discovered. Brett was devastated by the news and felt like giving up. He questioned the point of continuing with the interview process if no one wanted to hire an ex-criminal, regardless of his attempts to reform. Disheartened, Brett decided to abandon his university studies and instead use the money his mother and brothers had given him to finance his wedding to Kristen. He didn't inform his family or counselor about his decision to drop out of university, nor did he share the news about being rejected for the engineering job. Brett created a false image of himself as a successful businessman. He'd dress up in a suit and tie, then change into painting clothes on his way to work. He lied to his relatives, telling them he worked in an office, and supported this fiction by posting photos on social media that he downloaded from the internet. When he was with his family, Brett would often pretend to receive important work calls, making excuses to take care of urgent business matters. He was skilled at deceiving those around him, and no one suspected that he was actually just a house painter. In September 2016, Brett's 5-year relationship with Kristen was nearing its climax as they planned their wedding. He even agreed to rent an expensive restaurant that would cost $100 per guest. The Ryan family was overjoyed, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around, with a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and a beautiful fiancée. Brett's lies had spiraled out of control, and there was no escape from the consequences. With the wedding only a month away, he had invested heavily in the event. To foot the bill, he repeatedly borrowed money from his mother, and when she could no longer help, he shamelessly demanded that she get a better-paying job. Around the same time, he planned an extravagant bachelor party in August, inviting all his friends and brothers. As his web of lies began to unravel, Brett confided in his counselor about the situation. For a year, he had deceived his family into believing he worked as an engineer for a technology company. The psychologist was dismayed that his longtime client had gone astray again and advised Brett to confess everything to his mother. After much contemplation and procrastination, Brett finally came clean to her. His mother was outraged, having proudly told everyone about her supposed wonderful son. She insisted that Brett reveal the truth to Kristen, threatening to expose him herself if he didn't comply. Moreover, she warned him that his brothers were already aware of the situation and sided with her. Brett couldn't muster the courage to confess to Kristen, having struggled to tell the truth to his mother in the first place. Brett knew the wedding was only a month away, but he remained silent about his lies, even though it would be better for Kristen to know the truth beforehand. He was unsure what he was hoping to achieve by keeping quiet, but he couldn't shake the thought that his mother might expose him to Kristen, causing a scandal. Every time Kristen's phone rang, Brett's heart skipped a beat, fearing it was his mother calling to reveal his secrets. He breathed a sigh of relief when it was just a friend inquiring about the wedding plans. Desperate to stop his mother from interfering, Brett hatched a sinister plan. Because he was not allowed to use firearms due to his previous robbery conviction, he decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon. Brett had learned how to shoot a crossbow from his late father, who used to practice target shooting in their garden. Though his father had taught him well, he never intended for Brett to use this skill for harm. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows from a sporting goods store and hid them away, preparing to carry out his disturbing plan. Brett created an alibi to deceive others into thinking he was at home all day. He rigged a fan to turn on at a set time, which then moved a spoon across his computer keyboard, automatically posting pre-written comments on YouTube videos. On August 25th, Brett dressed in disguise to conceal his identity and left his house through the back door to avoid detection by security cameras. He took a train to his parents' house, intent on taking care of anyone who might threaten his and Kristen's well-being. When Brett arrived unexpectedly at his parents' house, his mother Susan was taken aback. Despite her poor health that day, Brett persisted in trying to convince her not to tell Kristen anything, eventually becoming angry and aggressive. Susan sensed something was wrong and, intimidated by her son's intense behavior, warned him that she had already called Christopher and he was on his way to their location. Brett's anger and adrenaline surged out of control as he ran to the garage to grab a crossbow. However, his emotional state prevented him from making a clear shot, so he instead used the butt of the gun to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he placed plastic bags over her body and tightened a rope around her neck. Brett then loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother Christopher to arrive. When Christopher called out for their mother or brother, Brett shot him in the neck from behind, causing his death within minutes. Susan, their mother, had also called their youngest brother Alexander, who was also shot in the neck, but the arrow didn't go deep enough, and he began screaming for help. Throughout the chaos, Leland was oblivious to the violence unfolding in the garage and garden, unaware that his own brother was committing the crimes. He slept in his second-floor room until a scream disturbed him. Rushing downstairs, Leland found Brett trying to strangle Alexander, and a fierce fight broke out between the two brothers. Once Leland gained the upper hand, he pushed Brett aside and ran to the neighbors to call the police. Brett realized he was trapped in the house with no escape, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. He acknowledged that he had ruined his life and there was no turning back. He took out his phone and wrote a letter to Kristen, begging for her forgiveness. When the police arrived, they found Brett sitting next to his brother Alexander, both of them covered in blood. Despite his injuries, Alexander was still alive, but later succumbed to his wounds in the hospital. Brett voluntarily handed himself over to the police, asking to be handcuffed and taken to the station. There, he confessed to the crimes and revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden under packages in the garage. He expressed regret, stating that he had never intended to kill Susan, only to scare her. However, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, using them as witnesses to his twisted scheme. If they hadn't arrived that day, they would still be alive, just like they had been nearly 10 years prior. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his depression, but it didn't lessen his punishment. Despite confessing to the crimes without resistance and cooperating with the investigation, he received 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. He will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the tragedy, has declined to speak to the press, but he is well known in Toronto for his traumatic experience. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki Len Ford, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in Minnesota. There is little information available about her parents and early life. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was young, and her mother raised her alone, providing her with a good education. Nikki was an exceptional student and athlete, excelling in track and field and martial arts. She decided to dedicate her life to fighting crime and served in law enforcement. After graduating with honors from the police academy, she moved to Minneapolis and joined the Criminal Investigation Department as an assistant investigator. Colleagues described Nikki as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer, ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, she became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. In 2012, at a martial arts competition, 23-year-old Nicole met Timothy "Tim" Ama, a coach and martial arts master who was 8 years her senior. Timothy, a gentleman man, won Nikki's heart with his charming nature and kind gestures. He demonstrated his reliability and care, making Nikki fall deeply in love with him. They started a romantic relationship and moved in together. Initially, everything was wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved. However, Timothy's behavior began to change gradually. He revealed his true nature, but subtly enough that Nikki wasn't alarmed at first. Behind his charming facade, Timothy was a sophisticated tormentor who enjoyed flirting with other women, even in Nikki's presence. This behavior hurt and humiliated Nikki, making her feel insecure. Nikki had hoped that Timothy would eventually settle down and become more restrained, but months passed and his behavior didn't change. He continued to flirt and engage in affairs, assuring Nikki that he loved only her. When Nikki confronted him, he would snap at her, saying she had no right to tell him what to do. He would later apologize, telling Nikki that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she would forgive him. The situation escalated in the fall of 2014 when Timothy flew into a rage during a minor argument, grabbing Nikki by the throat and choking her until she almost lost consciousness. He then pushed her into a wall, making her realize that she was in an unhealthy relationship. However, her emotional attachment to Timothy was too strong, and she forgave him once again. Timothy's behavior towards Nikki was extremely controlling and jealous. He would constantly monitor her movements, check her phone and social media without her permission, and accuse her of infidelity without any evidence. Despite his own infidelity, he would manipulate Nikki into believing that no one would ever love her as much as he did, trapping her in the relationship. In November 2015, after a violent argument, Nikki gathered her belongings and left the house. Timothy, who didn't believe she would actually leave, chased her down, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back inside. However, Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors, forcing Timothy to back down. Finally, free from the abusive relationship, Nikki felt a sense of relief. But Timothy didn't give up. He shifted his tactics from threats and blackmail to romantic gestures, sending flowers and messages filled with tenderness, pleading for another chance. For a month, Nikki stood firm, refusing to return to him. However, her plans were disrupted when she discovered she was pregnant in December 2015. Nikki knew that if Timothy found out, he would use it to manipulate her into getting back together. She tried to keep her pregnancy a secret, but their mutual friends and acquaintances soon informed Timothy, who urged her to return to him, arguing that their child should grow up in a complete family. Nikki, who grew up without a father, understood the challenges of single parenthood, but she also recognized that being with a manipulative and cruel person like Timothy would be detrimental to her and the child. Despite still having feelings for him, she refused to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, but she did agree to let him participate in their child's life as a nominal father. Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy named Callahan Ammer on June 20, 2016. The father, Tim, acknowledged paternity and initially expressed a desire to raise the child with Nicole. However, it soon became clear that Tim was not interested in being a good father and only wanted to use the child as a tool to manipulate Nicole. Nicole took almost a year of maternity leave to care for her son, devoting herself entirely to motherhood. Meanwhile, Tim continued his carefree life with multiple lovers and casual connections. He even had a system in place where he would signal to his lovers when he was available by turning on a purple light in his bedroom. In 2016, Tim started living with his 18-year-old protege, Colin, who had been deeply in love with him since she was 14. Despite the significant age difference, the couple hid their relationship from outsiders, claiming Colin was just renting a room in Tim's house. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work as a forensic expert at the Maine Police Headquarters in Minneapolis. With her unpredictable work schedule, she would often ask Tim to look after their son, mainly because she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father and to save on nanny costs. However, Tim would always shift the responsibility onto Colin, who developed a fondness for the little boy and enjoyed taking care of him. Tim would tell Colin that Nicole was a bad mother who didn't want to care for her child and was looking for excuses to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole started a new romantic relationship with a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford, who treated her with tenderness and care and expressed a desire to adopt Callahan. However, when Tim found out about their relationship, he became enraged and decided to use their son and the naive Colin to destroy Nicole's new relationship. Tim would regularly report to social services that Donovan was abusing Callahan and that Nicole was doing nothing to stop it, resulting in frequent visits from Child Protective Services. For years, Nicole and her new partner were subjected to harassment and intimidation by her ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who falsely accused them of domestic violence. Timothy convinced Colin, a friend, that Nicole and her partner were a danger to their son, Callahan, and that they might harm him. Timothy continued to psychologically manipulate Colin, convincing him that Callahan was in danger and that Nicole and her partner were cruel to him. Meanwhile, Timothy harassed and threatened Nicole and her partner, even filing false police reports against them. Donovan tried to have a calm and rational conversation with Timothy, but it didn't work. Timothy continued to terrorize Nicole and her partner, making their lives a living hell. He eventually took the matter to court, claiming he wanted sole custody of their son. Nicole was terrified, knowing Timothy's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually care about their son's well-being. He just wanted to punish her for moving on with her life. Meanwhile, Nicole decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed to her and her family. She was confident that she would gain custody of their son, but she knew the legal battles could drag on for years. During this time, Timothy continued to concoct fabricated stories, including a false accusation that Nicole had tried to run him over with her car. However, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. In September 2022, the custody case went to court, with Timothy accusing Nicole of harming their son. However, the court saw through his lies and awarded sole custody to Nicole. Despite this, Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. He was eventually allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to minimize conflict between parents. However, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son, a mysterious attacker dressed in black clothing and a mask approached her, shot her 4 times at close range, and quickly disappeared. Incredibly, Nicole remained conscious and managed to call emergency services despite being severely injured. A woman happened to be driving by when she heard shots fired and saw a black figure jump into a vehicle and speed away. She immediately pulled over to ensure the shooter was gone, then rushed to help the victim, Nicole. The woman explained what had happened to the dispatcher, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, ultimately saving her life. Nicole spent several days in a coma, teetering on the brink of life and death. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected, but doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. When Nicole regained consciousness, she reported to the police that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. The police interrogated Timothy, who had a solid alibi since he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, as confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. The investigation also explored the possibility that someone among the criminals Nicole had previously arrested might have organized the attack. 4 casings were found at the scene, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. An eyewitness reported seeing the same vehicle, which led the police to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, Timothy mentioned owning a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but not a pickup. However, the investigation revealed that Timothy was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. When shown the surveillance footage, Timothy admitted to owning the pickup, but claimed he rarely used it. The vehicle was equipped with colorful stickers, which were verified, but appeared to have been applied recently. While all the evidence was circumstantial, the police needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It was discovered that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing the tracing of the vehicle's entire route. The system revealed that the car was brought to the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, where it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced the vehicle's route, showing it arrived with license plates. The evening after the incident, the car used in the crime was found, but without the perpetrators. The person who drove the car that day was short and slender, with a feminine silhouette from a distance. As a result, the police decided to detain and question Amma's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search of their home was also conducted, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, the police discovered ammunition of the same caliber. Colin, who was frightened, soon began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that Timothy had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating Colin, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word. She felt sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that Timothy had provided her with the firearm and had taken it back after the assassination attempt, but she didn't know what he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, but Colin's confession was the decisive factor. The court also considered the testimony of the victim, Nicole, about Timothy's manipulative nature and his ability to deceive the women who loved him. Timothy Ama was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Colin Larson received 16 years in prison as the executive. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole fully recovered physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and he became a loving father to Callahan. The now married Ford couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life will be the child's godmother. It should be added that Timothy will be eligible for parole in 2035, but he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. Hello friends. Well, wedding date was eventually set. Let's take a step back and learn about Varka's background. Native of Warsaw, brutally killed Varka Rani just a few months into their marriage. The news sent shockwaves through both Jasvir's and Varka's families. Jasvir's family struggled to come to terms with their son's sexuality, while Varka's family was consumed by grief. The evidence against Jasvir was overwhelming, and he was subsequently taken into custody and brought to trial at Wolverhampton Crown Court. Although Jasvir initially attempted to denial and deceive to avoid punishment, he was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment after a grueling 3-month trial. Furthermore, he would be ineligible for parole for at least 20 years.